Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bloomberg UK. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, the race for number 10 is underway. The UK Prime Minister fired the starting gun yesterday afternoon, announcing a general election for July the 4th.
Now is the moment for Britain to choose its future, to decide whether we want to build on the progress we have made or risk going back to square one with no plan and no certainty. Earlier today, I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament. The King has granted this request, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
Now, the surprise move apparently even blindsided some of his own ministers. And now a 6-week battle for the future of Britain begins between Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party and Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Now, Sunak will fight the campaign in the belief that the economy is going to pick up further. But with the Tories trailing Labour significantly in the polls, and after bruising defeats in local elections, it will be an uphill battle for the PM. Now, meanwhile, Starmer will argue that the next government faces the worst economic inheritance since World War II.
Our offer is to reset both our economy and our politics, so that they once again serve the interests of working people. We totally reject the Tory view that economic strength is somehow gifted from those at the top. Over the past 14 years, through all the crises we've had to face, sticking with that idea has left our country exposed, insecure, and unable to unlock the potential of every community.
Well, let's bring in Lizzie Burden, our UK correspondent, who's at Westminster. Lizzie, you were at Downing Street yesterday. Why has he chosen July the 4th?
Well, Francine, I think it's fair to say that when everybody rushed down to the rainy Downing Street yesterday, most of Westminster were surprised he picked July the 4th. As you say, even some of his ministers were blindsided, including his own Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. Why did he name the date? Well, it means that there's no more speculation about when it's going to happen and who's going to lead the Conservatives into the general election. And why did he pick July the 4th? Well, yesterday was the day inflation came down to 2.3%. He says that's back to normal. Plus, the recent late public finances data suggests there isn't going to be much wriggle room for tax cuts before an autumn budget, before an autumn election, which is what many were hoping. But really the truth is that poll lead that Labour's got over the Conservatives has not been narrowing, it's only been widening. So now the challenge is for Keir Starmer, the opposition Labour leader, to turn that poll lead into votes. And that in itself is going to be a real challenge, given that the performance of his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, in 2019 was so dismal. It's going to be the biggest post-war electoral turnaround since the Second World War if he just wants to get into Downing Street. Interestingly, just behind us, there's a man taking bets on the outcome of this election. You know, day one, it's already started. The odds on a Labour majority, 2-9. No majority, 11-2. Conservative majority, 33-1. This is Betfair Exchange. And they say that they've taken more bets, not more money, more bets on no majority, which suggests that there is a lot of people out there who think that this could not be a big majority for Keir Starmer. They just don't want to put too much money on it because they don't think it's the most likely outcome.
Lizzie, thanks so much. Lizzie Burden there in Westminster. Now let's talk to Simon French, Panmure Gordon's managing director and head of research, and Bloomberg's Ailbhe. There's so much going on because July the 4th kind of took many by surprise. Ailbhe, some were saying actually it makes sense because of the inflation, because there's not going to be any tax cuts in the next budget. Like, is this a good plan? We also hear there's not, I mean, MPs may not be ready for this.
No, and as Lizzie mentioned, we reported this morning that even Jeremy Hunt was surprised by and kind of blindsided by this news yesterday. His allies actually thought, with all the speculation that there was something happening at 5 p.m, that maybe he was going to be sacked. That was how kind of tightly knit this decision was, and how much people weren't expecting it. I think it's safe to say, actually, even though Labour's in the lead, they've been a little bit blindsided by it too. The party only just allowed its staff to book holiday for the summer. They now have to quickly rescind that. So yeah, I suppose the Downing Street team thought that with the inflation figures this was a good time to go. I think others would argue actually that moved the inflation figures off the top of the news agenda yesterday. Instead we were just looking at Downing Street and Rishi Sunak in the rain.
I mean, Ailbhe, this, you know, you've covered politics for many years. So was this actually very tightly kind of secret, you know, kept secret so that they would blindside Labour so that they're not prepared, or what's the reason for this kind of coming out of the blue?
Yeah, I think that the political wisdom is that you have very few advantages as the government, as the incumbent. But one of them that you can use is the element of surprise that only Rishi Sunak could call the election, and so he did blindside Labour with this. I think that's the idea, but I mean, they are 20 points behind in the polls. It is a massive gamble. And definitely, speaking to cabinet ministers, MPs yesterday, there was a lot of shock, quite a lot of frustration, even just with the optics yesterday. I think a lot of Conservative ministers feeling that was quite unfortunate as their sort of opening bid to the public.
Simon, I mean, the rain didn't help the Prime Minister. I was kind of like, you felt sorry for him because it was, I think, a well-delivered speech, right? He set out his points, he seemed authoritative, but it was kind of like in the rain, he looked drenched, and then that kind of music blasting from, you know, pro-Labour.
Yeah, it wasn't the best optics, was it, for firing the starting gun on an election campaign where the narrative and the imagery is going to be key to frame, perhaps not throughout the first 6 weeks, but certainly over the next few days, he gets to that point. He gets to frame the narrative by the element of surprise. Look, I like to look through everything through an economics lens, but I think yesterday has to be interpreted through a political lens. I think the risk was that Rishi Sunak would be accused, as Gordon Brown was in 2009-10, of squatting in Downing Street when the public was ready for a change. And I don't think throughout the summer and into conference season Rishi Sunak wanted to be facing off to that.
I mean, we understand that the Prime Minister and, of course, his team thought that economics would maybe be on their side more as they called an election. I mean, the inflation figures, again, it's one inflation figure, it doesn't make a trend, but is that going to go against them?
Well, look, I think most people, not economists, not necessarily market participants, but most normal people would look at the price level, which is up 23% in the UK. It has to be said it's up 21% in the euro area, 21% in the US. So we're not massively out of kilter with those. But if you look perhaps with parallels the other side of the Atlantic with the United States, the Biden administration trying to go into their own election making a strong economic argument, which, by the way, on any objective measure is stronger than the UK, and yet the public not necessarily listening because they look at it in terms of price levels, not rates of change. But there is still some more disinflation to come. And we know the energy price cap in the UK, which is such a big input, goes down a further 7% on the 1st of July. So I think the inflation data potentially does get a little bit better, but I think the chances of any electoral support or credit is pretty limited.
UK May Services PMI are just coming out, falling to 52.9. Again, it's expansion, but it's less than expected. Manufacturing PMI, actually better than expected. It was in contraction, so it was below 50, and it's now at 51.3. When citizens go to vote, I mean, do they just vote on what the UK Conservatives have done for the last 13 years? Do they look at the price of milk, or do they look at other things?
I think going into this election, it feels a bit like a tipping point. For many people looking back at 1997, there was actually a much stronger economic recovery after the UK left the ERM, the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, in 1992. There was a currency devaluation, strong growth, real growth at annualised rates of 3-4% going into that. No credit given to Ken Clarke, the Chancellor at the time, John Major, the Prime Minister. I think there are big parallels there. Yes, a recovering economy, but actually I think to some extent, we've seen this in a lot of the by-election results, the local election results, just the country quite fatigued and ready to give the other side a turn. I think it's as simple as that.
But Ailbhe, which is why we haven't seen, like, Keir Starmer has been very careful in kind of not breaking the China, vase and actually not saying too much because he's so far ahead. Will that tactic change in the next 50 days of campaigning?
A little bit. I think they do have more announcements planned, but essentially they've already outlined their 6 pledges. I think there's thinking in the Labour Party that you can end up saying too much and that drowns out your entire message. In 2019, they learned that under Jeremy Corbyn, a lot of his policies individually polled very well, and collectively that manifesto was a disaster, led them to this historic defeat. So they have learned from that. It's a very different group of people leading the Labour Party now. I think that they are trying to emphasise economic stability rather than economic change or growth, which was what they were promising a couple of years ago. Stability first, basically. They want to promise change, but more than that, they want to be reassuring. That's their number one priority.
Okay, thank you both for joining us. I'm French there. Panmure Gordon's Managing Director and Head of Research stays with us. And thank you so much, Ailbhe, for also giving us some great insight. More analysis after the break, and this is Bloomberg. Still with us, Simon French, Panmure Gordon's Managing Director and Head of Research. We're also joined by Adrian Wooldridge from Bloomberg Opinion. You wrote a scathing opinion piece. I don't know if scathing. Do I call it scathing? I mean, it was quite opinionated.
I think scathing's fine.
I mean, you said basically it's time to get rid of the Tories.
Absolutely. I mean, the question is, why did they call the election when they did? And I think the answer is that there's simply nothing more left for them to do. They've been a failing government for some time now. There's no upside. There's just downside to remaining in power. I think it's good to get a new start.
But there's not money in the kitty.
There's no money in the kitty.
How much of a new start is it under a new government?
I think it's new people. It's new energy. I think these people have been in power for 14 years. A lot of them are very tired. A lot of them have run out of ideas. So new people. And I think that although there's not that much money around, I think there are organisational changes. There are ways of organising the way that planning is done, for example, that could get more productivity out of what we've got.
Yeah. Simon, is this a market event? I can't really make up my mind because it doesn't feel like, I know there's questions about carry trade and things like that Labour will have to probably drill down on.
I don't think it is a market-moving event either for sterling or for gilts or for UK equities. There may be, if we start to see in the manifestos, particularly on the Labour side, stuff that Adrian is talking about on planning, you may start to see some of the domestic house builders start to move on expectation of larger volumes. But I think any of the knotty political issues, the lesson from the 2017 general election when Theresa May tried to grip the issue of social care funding, it was dubbed the dementia tax. That will put off both sides, and particularly Labour, from putting anything transformative in the manifesto that could be picked on, grabbed as a soundbite and is used as a stick to beat an incoming Labour government on what they might do, even if they're very sensible, as actually arguably what Theresa May was proposing in 2017 actually was.
But what are the market betting on right now? I mean, I know we're not like political spinsters. Well, maybe Adrian is at the margin, but it seems like this is a Labour win, if not a landslide.
It does, although I was interested in what Lizzie was saying earlier before the break about Betfair getting a lot of bets on no overall majority. I think the nature of the swing required, given the Labour Party performance in the 2019 election, is significant. But I think the element that perhaps is being missed is quite how much Scotland coming back into play for Labour changes that calculation. Actually, therefore, the nationwide swing might not need to be as significant if the SNP collapse their vote share in Scotland.
Yeah, if you're an investor looking into the UK, do you feel like it's stable because Labour is really seen as pro-business? Or is there, again, what will they do for attracting money? This is a small, open economy.
I think it's pretty stable. I think Rachel Reeves has pledged to be very conservative in terms of what she's going to spend. There are no massive commitments. What commitments they've made, they've rapidly rode back on, such as all the money for green taxes. And I think they know that they're inheriting a difficult economy, and they will be conservative about that. I think there's a big difference between now and 1997. In 1997, Tony Blair inherited a good economy, a growing economy, and a very good fiscal position. We've not got that now. So in some ways, we'll have a continuation of what we've had over the last few years, which is disappointment, really. People wanting better public services, better productivity, all of those things, and the government really struggling to deliver what the people want.
So Adrian, how do the Tories, after the day after the election, then regroup?
Oh, well, that's going to be a very interesting story. If you think the last 14 years of Tory rule have been an era of chaos in the Tory party, you haven't seen anything yet. You're going to have a big battle between people who think the Tories have to move to the right to bring back the reform voters and who think that the future lies in bringing Boris back or Farage into the Tory party in some way, and the people who think that they need to move right back to the centre and go back to a more one-nation traditional Toryism. So there'll be a lot of fighting on the right.
I'm sure. Simon, does this help out the Bank of England? Because again, there was concern about the timing of the rate cut and whether they'd be seen as political. Of course, we're not expecting anything, possibly until the summer.
Yeah, I mean, look at the danger of pushing my own house view. We've thought the first rate cut all year would come in August, and actually a combination of the general election, but perhaps more relevantly, a 2.3% headline print on CPI yesterday, but a 5.9% services print within that, probably gives the Bank of England pause for thought of entering itself in the margins into a febrile political atmosphere in a general election campaign. They've got another 6 weeks until the August MPC. They want to ease monetary policy. I think staying out of the election and going 6 weeks later in the start of August is the smarter move. No one associated with the Bank of England will publicly or even probably privately acknowledge that would weigh on their thinking, but I think it will.
Yeah, it has to factor into their thinking. Simon, thank you so much. As always, Simon French, Panmure Gordon's Managing Director and Head of Research, and Bloomberg Opinion's Adrian Wooldridge also joining us. Now, be sure to catch a special episode of Bloomberg's Voternomics podcast analyzing the Prime Minister's decision. Adrian features in that. That's available now wherever you get your podcasts. Now, coming up, BHP has won an extra week to convince Anglo American on its $49 billion takeover plan. Will that be enough time to iron out a deal? We'll have more on that next. And this is Bloomberg. Economics, finance, politics. This is Bloomberg UK. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, BHP has won an extra week to convince Anglo American on its $49 billion takeover plan. After a month of rising tensions, the companies are holding talks after BHP raised the value of its proposal for a third time earlier this week. Well, let's get straight to Will Kennedy, of course, who oversees all of our commodities and energy coverage. Well, okay, an extra week. I mean, does it give it enough time? They don't want to go hostile. Does it give enough time to convince them that they're the best solution?
Obviously, it's a sign that they're starting to talk, and that's the big change. They asked for an extra week and said they're open to having the conversation. I think there are a couple of things to bear in mind as we wait for the denouement of this saga over the coming days. First, I think the two sides are probably close on price. The first two reactions to BHP's offer said that it undervalued the company. It was interesting to see that reference dropped, which suggests that on value they're close. The sticking point, as we've discussed all the way through, is South Africa. And Anglo American's concern is that the proposal to demerge two South African businesses is overly complicated and will make executing a deal very hard to do. So I suspect the talks will focus on the mechanics of getting the deal done around the South African business. Where we ultimately get to, we don't know. I still think it's possible that BHP ends up walking away.
So, well, the question is, and I know I always tap you for information, I call you, I try and grab you in corridors, is why is no one else coming in? This, and you say everyone's busy, and then we have this article actually in the FT saying that there's an activist investors saying Rio Tinto should abandon its primary London listing because it gives them a discount because of the dual listing, but also because they can't do large acquisitions. Yeah,
so Rio Tinto has this dual listing structure. And the London primary listing trades at a discount to Australia. I think a lot of people feel that that does limit their room for manoeuvre in doing big paper public transactions. Of course, BHP a few years back had a similar dual listing structure, and under pressure from Elliott at the time, an activist investor, it changed that. And one of the consequences of them simplifying their structure is they are able to do perhaps this deal with Anglo today. So it's not a surprise that that structure for Rio is coming under scrutiny. Whether it ultimately leads to change, I think it's too early to say. Yeah.
I mean, could someone come back in, or would that take months?
For Anglo?
Yeah, for Anglo.
I think at this stage, that's unlikely. But if the deal doesn't happen and BHP has to go away for 6 months under the takeover code's put up or shut up provision, obviously a leaner Anglo, an Anglo which has promised to restructure himself, will come back as a possible takeover target. And I don't think that speculation will go away in the months or years ahead.
Well, thank you so much, as always, Will Kennedy, there with the insight and inside on some of these deals. Now, be sure to catch a special episode of Bloomberg's Votonomics podcast analyzing the Prime Minister's decision. It's available from today. This is Bloomberg.